You said you'd make me beg for death. Now the only death you'll see today is your own.
Oh, look at me, I'm shaking in my little space boots.
I think it's fair to say that if you're a millennial or older, you no doubt remember just how much of a big deal Lord of the Rings was back in the early 2000s, being some of the first properly epic movies that a lot of us actually got to see in the cinemas, and still a trilogy of films that holds up and stands the test of time. Then in terms of the video games that were based off them, we were definitely eating pretty good too, as anyone who played The Two Towers and Return of the King can attest to. Well, another one of those really awesome titles was Monolith Productions' Shadow of Mordor, released in 2014. A really cool action/stealth adventure set in Mordor itself, where you played as a vengeful ranger coming back from the dead. Released for the PS4, the Xbox One, the PC, and then amazingly also the older gen consoles as well, with the PS3 and the 360, though yeah, the less said about those ones, the better. Either way though, it's something I just randomly decided to pick up and play through again over the holidays, and I really was surprised at just how much fun it is to still play. So why don't we take a look at it, because yeah, what else is going on right now?
I'm famished. Let's get this over with.
Before we get too far into things though, I do have to thank Odoo for sponsoring this video. But what is Odoo? Well, Odoo is an all-in-one business management platform that offers users over 70 applications to help them with the day-to-day management of their business operations. I mean, there's an app for sales, invoicing, accounting, project management, websites, and a whole bunch more. Today though, we're taking a quick look at their e-commerce application, which couldn't be easy to get up and running. And let's go off the premise here that I'm going to be setting up a store to sell off some of my retro games. Right, so for starters, you got this really handy configurator to guide you through all the steps, along with then being able to generate a website template from scratch based off all the information you give it. Then all you need to do after that is drag and drop your design blocks to truly customize everything, using this really intuitive menu system. Adding products is also really easy. You just enter in all the required information, such as the name of the item, the pricing, and then boom, there it is. Now pretty much every year, Odoo releases a new version of this platform, including brand new app features. In version 19, for instance, they added an AI-assisted SEO optimizer tool to make sure your store can hit as many eyes as possible. And another major benefit of this AI assistance option is that if you're a beginner or need extra help with SEO, then with one click of a button, you can allow the AI to fill out all of these boxes for you. And with Odoo, you can now launch your first e-commerce site for free, under Odoo's One App for Free Life offer, giving you unlimited hosting and support. Not to mention, you'll get a free personalized domain name for a whole year. So, to start your e-commerce journey and get to selling, check out the link in the description to get started. And yeah, once again, thanks to Odoo for sponsoring this video. So, Shadow of Mordor has a pretty brutal opening. Starts with the main character Talion, who's this captain of the watch at the Black Gate, and also one of them rangers.
He's one of them rangers.
Training his son in how to sword fight, which then also serves as a very basic tutorial for how combat works.
It'll take a lot more than that.
There's a bit of a twist though. In this game, the Black Gate functions more like the Wall in the Game of Thrones series, as this sort of defensive stronghold occupied by men, to guard the rest of the world from the horrors that lurk on the other side.
I'll have your guts.
And we soon see what those horrors are, as it jumps forward to a point in time when the Black Gate's under attack by Uruks. After a brief combat sequence, it flashes back again, showing us a really heartwarming scene where Talion sneaks up on his wife using the game's stealth mechanics, making it, as far as I know, the only game ever made where you can stealth kiss someone.
Happy anniversary, my love.
Alien, this is beautiful. Where did you find it?
All to make sure that the heartstrings are well and truly primed to be tugged, because after this it goes back to that battle scene where Talion's overwhelmed, and then helplessly forced to watch as both his son and wife are murdered right in front of him, with Talion then quickly being finished off soon after.
We'll be together, my love. Soon. Forever.
For some reason though, it turns out that he can't die, because as he learns, he's been bound to the wraith of a former elf named Celebrimbor.
If what you say is true, then how do we break this curse?
Meaning he can never truly die either, as every time he's killed, he just gets pulled back from the void, seemingly none the worse for wear. Yeah, I guess you could say that he lives again.
Shut up!
Anyway, now stuck with Celebrimbor like some kind of comedy odd couple, they venture off into Mordor to find the people that killed his family.
We find the one who cast it on us. The Black Hand of Sauron.
With the perpetrators being the so-called Black Hand of Sauron, who obviously have direct ties to Sauron himself. And in fact, Celebrimbor also has ties of his own, being the same bloke who's responsible for creating the original Rings of Power.
I crafted the Rings of Power.
And it actually ends up becoming more about this guy's need for vengeance over trying to eradicate Sauron specifically. Either way though, it is a surprisingly well-told story with some genuinely likeable characters here and there.
Better sharpen the swords, eh? And make sure our boots are nice and shiny.
In the second era, for instance, you meet a dwarf hunter named Torvin, and you spend a fair few missions helping the guy track down this super powerful monster that he's been hunting for years. It's not until his final mission where he reveals that he's after this thing because it killed his old hunting partner. And then it's shortly after that that we learn that his hunting partner was his own brother.
That's just as sharp as the day our father made it.
Realizing that all the jokes and the witty banter was a subtle way to mask all the trauma and the pain this guy had been carrying around trying to confront this thing.
I think he's dead.
Talion's shown to have a lot of empathy for all these other human survivors too. Like, again in this second area, he encounters Lady Marwyn and her oddly attractive daughter named Lothariel. And he does everything he can to help them, even urging them to get out of Mordor. Even the first area is about him assisting a group of former slaves to try to escape from all these Uruk camps.
Get your people out of Mordor tonight, or you'll all be dead by dawn.
Which then contrasts with Celebrimbor's more cold and distant tone, where he's far more about the overall goal and less concerned with collateral damage and innocent people caught in the crossfire.
Don't you see? The prisoner created a distraction.
I still think it's a really awesome looking game too, with a whole night and day cycle thing going on, and some great little effects with things like water and mud. When it starts raining heavily, you'll see droplets of water bounce off Talion's cloak and get a good look at his face during combat, and you'll see it contorted with effort as he rends all these foes to pieces. The way that Celebrimbor sort of seamlessly extends himself through Talion's body during certain actions looks great as well. And I love the sound design when you're running around in that Wraith mode, scanning the area for potential targets. There's only two main areas you explore in the game, but both of these are really unique visually as well. Udun's the first one, and it's a bit of a volcanic wasteland with mud, ash, and all these Uruk camps and forts, populated with human slaves that are marched around like cattle, with the whole place feeling very hostile and barren. And then the second area by the sea is surprisingly fertile, with fields of grass, lakes, and all these abandoned ruins and other settlements. As if like the corruption from that first area hasn't quite spread yet. It all just kind of comes from that time in gaming where it's old to a point where it doesn't look too dated and still has that overall charm and aesthetic of a bygone era. I mean, there's a reason why so many games from the mid-2000s still stand up visually. Which kind of makes you realize how little things have actually changed in the past 10 years. As for the gameplay, well, like a lot of other games did back then, it takes a lot of influence from the Arkham series and Assassin's Creed games. In fact, to an almost blatant degree. I mean, the combat is quite literally just lifted out of the Arkham series and pasted into this. For starters, combat is all about basic attacks combined with parrying or countering when a prompt comes up above an enemy's head, using a combination of Talion's sword for primary attacks and then a dagger for takedowns, with this dagger being the shattered sword of his murdered son. Badass. And then Celebrimbor's elven bow able to be whipped out at any time for a ranged attack. This is all then connected to a combo meter, and when you reach certain amounts here, you can use different combat abilities. One of which is called Elven Light, which is quite literally identical to the shockwave attack that Batman does. And when someone's dazed or knocked over, you can finish them off with a ground takedown. Another one gives you an instant execution against a single enemy. Again, sounds familiar. Which is really useful when you're outnumbered and also has some really satisfying sound work. Not to mention great use of slow motion to really heighten how brutal this finishing strike actually is. And yeah, dog, like how about that awesome looking blood effect too, which still looks really impressive. In fact, one of Talion's final abilities gives you like 20 seconds of infinite takedowns, where you're more or less terrorizing the Uruk until the timer runs out, with the surrounding area being covered in more bodily fluids than your mum's bed sheets. Yes, a definite I'm not trapped in here with you, you're trapped in here with me kind of moment. Talion can also stun enemies using Celebrimbor, leaving them wide open to a follow-up combo. Again, kind of familiar. The only thing here is that in the Arkham series, you couldn't upgrade this, so it'd cause an enemy's head to pop off like a champagne cork. Another thing worth mentioning is the whole critical hit system, which encourages timed attacks as opposed to button mashing, requiring the player to be more mindful of who they're attacking, which is again kind of similar to the Arkham games. But even then, man, like, it doesn't stop there. Like, you got guys with shields that first have to be leapt over so you can actually hit them. And one of the boss fights seems familiar too, where you hit a larger enemy in the face with a ranged weapon to stun them while they're charging. You can even interrogate certain NPCs for information, which is the exact same thing as going around and grabbing those Riddler informants.
Tell me everything about the Riddler.
They're the same picture.
Plus, it's like it takes a bit of a cue from Sleeping Dogs, with the whole terror and flinching system, where certain attacks can cause enemies to stagger back or even run away. One of the coolest implementations there is how you can brutally take down enemies from stealth, what the game suitably calls brutalizing, pretty much turning them into Uruk Sashimi, which is going to make everyone nearby flee in terror. And yeah, man, like, I get it, if some random ranger popped out of nowhere and started cutting up one of my buddies like that, I'd probably haul ass too. In fact, it's probably the most intelligent things the Uruk actually do in this game, which all does kind of remind me of the similar combat in Sleeping Dogs, where you could snap someone's leg or arm and it'd cause nearby gangsters to fall back. Then for all the enemies hanging back and pelting you with spears or crossbow bolts, you got that bow, which seems to have near infinite range. Also having an interesting feature where you can shoot campfires and cause them to explode, as if they were using like nitroglycerine for kindling. As for all the Assassin's Creed stuff, well, that becomes instantly noticeable as soon as you start moving around, with it being the exact same movement system almost verbatim. Like, run toward any surface and Talion's gonna effortlessly grapple over it or as high as he can get. Useful for the many towers you have to again climb and claim as fast travel points, which, yeah, do I even need to say it, is pretty much the same as the synchronization points, where you climb up all these towers in the Assassin's Creed games and have those nearby areas of interest added to your map. Yeah, and I appreciate it too, how Talion moves up these things with a bit of haste. It's also got very similar stealth mechanics where you can hide in grass and attract people to your location, or skulk around from the high ground before taking someone out with a stylish looking takedown. There's even a bit of Far Cry in here as well, in the way you can shoot down the bait in enemy camps to attract Caragors. You know, kind of similar to how in the Far Cry games you could attract wild animals to clear out enemy outposts. I think one of the only original things this game does is how you can drain Uruk to get back health and arrows. But even this seems kinda familiar, as Talion holds his hand up while he's doing it as if he's Darth Vader that's force choking a bitch. Now look, like, that's not to say that all it does is just copy everyone else, and there is a few cool moves here and there. For instance, you've got this whole Shadow Strike ability where you can teleport pretty much any distance into an enemy, to either knock them down or instantly kill them. Even eventually upgrading this so it can chain to nearby enemies, which is just awesome. And maybe this is ripping off another game I haven't played, to be honest, I'm not sure. And I do know that there was a similar mechanic in Assassin's Creed Mirage. But to the best of my knowledge, like, this one seems to be exclusive to Shadow of Mordor. I think the big takeaway though is that despite this knocking off ideas from so many other games, it's kind of astounding how they all work really fucking well together. And you very quickly get the hang of things here and just start clearing house, making you feel like an absolute badass very early on. I mean, some of the animations during executions are just so satisfying, and it never feels like a slog or that you're getting bored or running out of things to kill. Outside of the Uruk, there's a few other beasties roaming the lands here with the Caragors and the Grorgs. Now, Caragors are kind of similar to the Wargs from the book and the films. They're these large wolf-like creatures, whereas the Grorgs are made up for the game. Similar to cave trolls and also looking a lot like the Rancor in Return of the Jedi. And you can even tame the former and ride them around the map to get to places faster, like your own personal mount. Which is kind of handy as well because you have a lot of ground to cover here. Now, your first act of business in the game is to help this former group of slaves and prisoners to escape Mordor,
Well, this doesn't bode well.
with them being led by a bloke named Hergon. Hergon?
You know this man.
Of course. You're staring at him.
You're also doing missions for old mate Gollum, who's portrayed very closely to how he appears in the movies, being about as trustworthy as a pair of fishnet undies. But the real main goal before you can leave this first area is to take out these 4 Uruk war chiefs, which is where this whole captain and Nemesis system finally comes into play.
You again. No trickery with fire or magic will help you this time.
Which is still hands down one of the coolest features in any video game, like ever. Right, so very early on here, you meet this little likable Uruk named Ratbag, who is surprisingly charming.
Marvelous.
Given that he's got a face that looks like a prolapsed anus. Anyway, this guy runs you through all the details here of how this all works, where you even spend a few missions orchestrating his own rise to power.
Yeah, and when you're done with that, I've got more bodies for you to carry.
And then from that point on, it's this never-ending, constantly shifting lineup of randomly generated Uruks for the player to engage with. All of these guys have different attributes with strengths and weaknesses, along with unique appearance and personality. And it's pretty common early on here to constantly run into them during combat without even trying. Can be kind of tough fighting them initially as well because you don't have all that many combat moves available, but later on, once you've unlocked more abilities, it becomes far easier to the point that you're outright overpowered. One of my favourite upgrades in that regard is a modifier you get for Talion's Leap move, which also freezes enemies that you use it on, leaving them wide open for that free combo. And while some of these captains can be killed super easily with tactics like this, or even as something as basic as a stealth takedown, others seem resistant to pretty much everything you've got.
Man, swine!
To the point that you need to use every trick in your arsenal. It's always going to be changing as well, and like while one guy might be terrified of fire and weakened by it, another one is going to get enraged by it, effectively preventing you from using the same strategies over and over. With these war chiefs also being the toughest of the toughest, even having their own individual war chants when they approach, which I never got tired of hearing. But even these fights can be made easier if you choose to take out the captains that are their bodyguards beforehand, getting rid of their little entourage and giving you the path of least resistance. And it's just by far the best aspect to Shadow of Mordor's gameplay. I mean, you could spend tens of hours, if not hundreds, buggering around with this stuff alone. It's almost like a whole chess game where you got all these Uruk captains moving around the ranks, even when you're not doing anything. With there also being these side missions that can affect the outcomes of who lives or dies. Missions you can either play a part in or just sit back and watch from a distance.
Enjoy yourselves, lads! It's feasting time!
Either way though, you're eventually going to have to confront these guys, and it is almost always entertaining, with them always delivering this cheesy monologue before they fight.
Hey! I'll remember you, maggot, and you'll remember me when I shove my blade up your ass.
Sometimes even after you've killed one, they'll just come back later on, sporting some kind of new scar, or with their head now somehow sewn back on its shoulders.
Get on your knees and beg forgiveness for what you did to my face!
And it is downright endearing in a weird way, seeing these ugly motherfuckers coming back again, and going on about how this is the time that they're gonna get ya, only for you to just kill them minutes later all over again. If one of the Uruks does actually kill you, they even end up getting promoted and moving up the ranks, as if they've hit their monthly quota for Rangers killed, and then you can go after that one specifically for revenge. In fact, that's almost encouraged, because letting these guys kill you on purpose is a good way to get them to level up, which makes them tougher but also increases the chance that they drop better gear. And later on in the game, you can even send death threats to these guys as well, using other Uruks as messengers, which pisses them off and levels them up, but again has that same effect of giving them a higher chance to drop better runes. Which, in lieu of an actual gear system with different kinds of armor and all that stuff, is the main way you can customize Talion's build. And this is actually a pretty addictive little component to the game as well, trying to get the best possible runes here, really encouraging you to go after those tougher captains. In fact, for that reason alone, I was using a lot of runes that would amplify the damage I did to captains specifically, along with buffing up my damage overall. Plus I also had a rune on my sword that'd make it so critical hits would give the weapon bonus flame damage, and another one that gave me an extra 50% worth of slow-mo time when I was aiming with the bow. And the amount of options you've got there is downright impressive. I mean, for each weapon alone, you can eventually unlock 5 slots for runes. And even after 20 or so hours of game time, I was still seeing different ones dropping. It would probably get a bit boring though if you just did the same thing over and over though, which is probably why towards the end of the game they had the smart idea to introduce this mechanic where you can now dominate Uruks and mind control them instead of killing them, all to build up this grand army and take on the Black Hand of Sauron. And this includes a whole new concept too, where you can help some poor, lowly Uruk rise the ranks and become a war chief, while you're off on the side there, assisting them from the shadows like some kind of silent benefactor. And I think I actually appreciate how they did this for the second area, so it wasn't just repeating the same thing over and over ad nauseum. Speaking of this Nemesis system too, like, I have seen people bitching online a lot about how Monolith Productions trademarked this whole mechanic, and then just never used it outside of both of these games. And to that, all I want to say is, good. It's kind of like, why would you want a really awesome feature like this to be overused and pop up in every single video game until we all got sick of it? I mean, I think the fact that they did trademark it and never used it outside of the series is part of what makes it so unique and interesting. I mean, I'm glad that we only got it in 2 games. It is kind of funny though, considering how many mechanics and ideas Shadow of Mordor copies, or you might say steals from other video games, only for them to be so protective of the one actually unique idea that it does have. But still, like, it's hands down the best aspect that it has going on here, if nothing else the most enduring, considering that it really never comes to an end, and you can just keep killing Uruks over and over, with there always being one popping up in its place. Kind of reminds me of that scene in the first Lord of the Rings movie where the Fellowship is escaping the mines of Moria and getting shot at by nearby orcs. And you see Legolas taking them out with his bow, only for them to just get instantly replaced by another. It's kind of what it feels like here, where you're in this never-ending battle with a perpetual army of disgusting looking killing machines.
Not a good time to lose one's head.
But what I think I like the most about Shadow of Mordor is that while it obviously felt like an Arkham and an Assassin's Creed game, it also seemed to do it without all that unnecessary fluff. In the sense that it didn't feel like it had a bazillion tedious things for me to find and collect, just for the sake of having a bazillion things for me to find and collect. I mean, Arkham City, for instance, had what, like 400 or something Riddler trophies and puzzles to complete in total? And then Assassin's Creed 2 had the infamous feathers, which was even more menial. While Shadow of Mordor might have that infinite Nemesis System thing going on there, the rest of the content doesn't feel like that. And it's only got 2 areas in total, with something like 50 collectibles all up across both of them. Now, that's not to talk shit about either of those games, but if you're like me, you probably only ended up getting all those Riddler trophies just to get it done. And it's not like they were all incredibly fun and engaging to find. I mean, there's 10 side missions here which level up Talion's sword, dagger and bow, which on the other hand might seem like a lot. But all of these are different from one another, so it's not just repeating the same shit over and over. It's a game world that feels large with a lot of stuff to do, but then it also feels like it respects my time. And I don't know, like, I guess that's why I like it so much. And in the 25 or so hours I spent with it, I never felt like I was wasting my time or not accomplishing something. The main thing that it has going against it though are the boss fights, which really are kind of terrible and do feel very half-assed. The first main boss, for instance, is just about timing parries over and over, charging up so you can use a combat execution, and then just repeating that over and over until the boss actually dies. And then the last couple of bosses aren't even really bosses. One of them is against the tower, which involves sneaking around a small area, and then doing stealth attacks and all these different projections, before Talion finishes the guy off in a cutscene.
We haven't touched the controller for 45 minutes.
And yeah, speaking of cutscenes, the final showdown against Sauron is more or less just that as well, being a really easy quick time event that has a grand total of 5 button inputs. Yeah, the mighty Sauron, who brought all of Middle-earth to its knees and almost plunged the entire world into darkness, is able to be brought down here with a few button prompts.
Strike now, Talion! I cannot hold it for much longer!
And yes, I get that at this point in the story he's not yet at full power, but it's still kind of like watching a grizzly bear lose a fight to a field mouse. Still though, if nothing else, it is a pretty cool ending, showing how despite how powerful Talion and Celebrimbor have become, it's really just a drop in the ocean compared to Sauron's overall power. And it is still pretty bleak stuff as well, showing that Talion hasn't really accomplished anything. I mean, he's killed some of the people responsible for the death of his family, but it hasn't brought him any kind of peace. In fact, if anything, it's made the whole situation worse. Because now they've all decided that the only way to fight this power is with more power, with it having a purposefully climactic ending, hinting that they're going off to forge their own ring to match Sauron's.
The time has come for a new ring.
Overall though, like, I still just had so much fun playing through this. And I do actually remember playing it when it first came out, but for whatever reason, I did give up after about 5 or 6 hours. Either getting bored or sidetracked, I can't remember why. But either way though, coming back to it now, it's something that I really couldn't put down. I mean, it's one of those instances where when I wasn't playing a game, all I could think about was playing that game. And it's just a great example of something that came out before we got into those darker times of 2015 and onward, where shit like loot boxes and battle passes started becoming mainstream, where games became more about retention than completion. And also a lot of the time too, where sequels didn't really live up to their predecessors. Which we saw with stuff like Mass Effect Andromeda, Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and then case in point, Shadow of War. A game which is no doubt more remembered now for the whole launch drama it had over all the loot boxes and pay-to-win mechanics, which overshadowed the more questionable design choices they made as well.
Oh, you don't have to tell me.
Story-wise, this kicks off pretty much right after the events in the first game, with Talion and Celebrimbor deciding that the only way to fight Sauron is to beat him at his own game, by creating their own Ring of Power. All which ends up in this slow descent to corruption, as they eventually build up another army Yauriks and refer to themselves as the Bright Lord.
Mordor belongs to the Bright Lord!
I don't care!
Which includes one of the most awkward lines of dialogue I think I've heard in a video game in a long time.
Strong as these warriors are, they cannot resist my ring.
Plus, it does kind of make me wonder if someone at Monolith Productions played Metal Gear Solid 5 and thought that they'd try to tell their own vision of a former hero and their descent into villainy. At least, eventually anyway, because before all of that happens, they give the ring to Shelob, in exchange for a bunch of visions into the future.
I'm impressed, Ranger.
Because the main plot is that the city of Minas Ithil is under siege by the Witch King and the Nazgul, getting captured very early on in the game. And at the center of all of this is an object called the Palantir, also used by Saruman in the books and the movies, which is that little orb thing he's got that can predict the future, and also allow the user to basically see anything else going on in the world. So Talion, in his newfound quest for power, is obviously going after this thing for his own agenda.
None can withstand its influence.
I can.
Wrong! And while it all might sound pretty good, and it does make for a nice premise, the problem is that a lot of these side characters really aren't all that memorable anymore. Baranor and Idril, for instance, are two Gondorians trying to reclaim the city, working alongside Talion a fair bit here, but they're just kinda boring, barely leaving any kind of impression.
Then I'll see it done.
There's Kanan, this sort of ancient spirit that resides in the forest, who just kind of sounds like the Swedish chef from the Muppets.
A crack across the land. Fire woken by a cold metal ring.
But the weirdest thing here is how they're trying to humanize Shelob, turning her into a shapeshifter that spends most of the time appearing as this incredibly attractive woman, who some people have theorized is supposed to be based off a certain adult film star. And yeah, if you know, you know.
How much are you willing to sacrifice?
But as far as I know in the books, like, isn't she supposed to be some kind of ancient evil being that doesn't really serve anyone or have any allegiances, let alone someone that can shapeshift? And yet here it's almost like they've tried to make her come across as tragic and sympathetic, as if the only reason she's the way she is because Sauron betrayed her, which is what turned her into this nasty creature. And I don't know, man, like, it's all just very un-Lord of the Rings.
That is what you seek, isn't it?
As is also having Talion more or less single-handedly take on a Balrog and ultimately defeated himself. Yeah, remember how back when Gandalf fought one, how it quite literally fucking killed him? Yeah, well, none of that stuff here. You just shoot it in the back a bunch of times. Yeah, or for just kind of the sake of having a big, dumb video game boss spectacle.
I'm so depressed I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, so I can kind of understand why a lot of this left actual Lord of the Ring fans a bit dumbfounded.
Your vision is limited. I would love nothing more than to see his torment.
As for the gameplay, well, it reuses a lot of mechanics and ideas from the first game, just with a few changes here and there. For starters, and on a positive note, parkour and getting around is now a lot faster, thanks to a boost move when jumping and a sort of a speed dash when running around. Plus, I do like it as well how you can summon in a Caragor and eventually a Drake to ride around at any time, which is pretty awesome and a much easier way to get around the map. Most of the combat abilities return here as well, just with a few more customization options, like Elven Light for instance can now be upgraded to do poison damage. And there's more creative ways that takedowns are implemented during stealth and combat. But then it also feels like it's downgraded certain things and made them outright worse. For instance, you're no longer resistant to fire anymore, and blowing up grog or shooting campfires is going to very quickly burn you. But then for some reason you can dive headfirst into these things and somehow be impervious. Okay. And while this new Elven Rage ability, which replaces Talion's other abilities, is kinda cool, it takes so long to charge up that you barely ever get to use it. I also think it's asinine how ground executions can still be interrupted, even if you've quite literally got your knife in someone's neck. It's like if you're forced to stop and counter at the very last nanosecond, it still somehow cancels it out. The other thing that really irked me about Shadow of War was how they've included this new system around armor and items, to give Talion these incremental buffs to his health and focus. Totally removing the sense of value a lot of these items have, considering you're going to be swapping them out to something better every 20 minutes. I mean, never mind that Talion's dagger was supposed to be symbolic, being the destroyed remnants of the sword left behind by his murdered son. But nah man, like let's just swap it out to something completely different, you know, because I've found a better dagger that does frost damage. Now I do know that this was also around the time that Assassin's Creed Origins came out, which very famously introduced that series to leveled gear and weapons too. And yeah, like it's no secret that these games obviously take a lot of influence from that series, so I'm not too sure if it was just another feature they were lifting. But either way though, like, it kind of cheapens the system a bit here, and really does make it seem like how well you play overall is more dependent on the kind of gear you're wearing, you know, as opposed to actual skill, which is the same thing that's happened to a lot of the combat mechanics. Like how in the first game, how your combat abilities were tied to the combo meter, with abilities able to be used once you reached a certain hit count, meaning you had to try to keep this all unbroken and not get hit or interrupted. Now it's all based off this tacked on might meter, which just fills up over time when attacking, along with through stealth kills or even just parkour moves. And in fact, you can even store it up and save it to be used later on. The problem though is that it takes really long to charge up, and you can have a super high hit streak without barely even having any might. Critical hits aren't based off timing now either, instead it's just completely random chance as to whether a hit is going to be critical, which does fall in line with standard sort of RPG fare, but again removes a lot of the skill to the combat, removing that whole element of timing your attacks during a fight. And it just felt so rewarding in that first game to successfully time your strikes and build up that combo meter. Not to mention, it gave you faster access to all of your combat abilities, which played a big part in what made you feel so powerful. Now though, you can just mash the attack button over and over without worrying about any of that, and either parry or dodge whenever you need to. There is still an upgrade in there, which brings back the timed critical hit thing from the first game, but even then, it's still not guaranteed. It just increases the chance that it's going to be critical. And it's just kind of like all the fun, super power fantasy stuff from the first game's either been removed or just severely dulled back. Even the focus meter runs out much quicker now too, along with the max amount of arrows you can carry around being a lot lower as well. You also get no XP from fighting the basic Uruks, which quite literally removes the point of fighting them at all. I don't know, like I can't tell you how many times I'd be playing the first game and just come across a small patrolling group of enemies and fuck them all up just for the hell of it. I mean, not only was it fun, but it also gave you a little bump in experience points, keeping you moving ahead to that next level game. Now though, you only get XP from completing missions and killing the captains, just making these standard guys a literal distraction and an obstacle in between taking them out. Oh yeah, and can we also talk a little bit about the captains here, in how they kind of went a little bit overboard on all the different amount of options and attributes they've got now? I mean, in the first game, once you had the intel on someone, it was then pretty easy to get yourself set up to best take them out, and you had a good idea on what to do and what not to do so they didn't get pissed off. Here though, in Shadow of War, there's often so many more variables. For instance, certain captains can get enraged by you simply using acrobatics to leap over them. And some of them get enraged by injury, as in they get enraged by simply losing health. I've even seen ones which get enraged by everything. Yeah, I know how they feel. And when these guys are enraged, they just spam this unblockable attack over and over. Whereby all you can do there is just spam the dodge roll so you don't get pancaked. They've also now got the ability to adapt to your attacks over time, which is actually a really awesome idea, and prevents you from just spamming the same moves over and over.
You already tried that!
However, early on when you're not really got all that many abilities unlocked, it's possible for them to quite literally adapt to every single move you've got, to the point where it seems like they're more or less impossible to kill. Oh yeah, and speaking of which, some of these can now outright ignore a killing blow, something the game calls death-defying.
Brought down by a measly tark? I don't think so.
Yeah, which is super fun after you've just spent all this time wailing on them. At one point I even had this happen to me back to back against 3 different captains.
No, this is wrong. You won't kill me today.
They can also eventually resist being dominated as well, what the game calls having an iron will.
My mind is free.
They cannot resist my ring.
Whereas others can now just escape completely, vanishing off the screen as soon as they're out of sight. Which is again, super fun after you've spent 5 minutes hunting them down and fighting them. It is still pretty interesting and hilarious stuff though, and I had one guy in particular come back from the dead about 4 times.
We've been here before, and each time I come back more machine than orc.
At which point I felt I pretty much had to recruit him. But it does feel overall like this game has less consideration for the player's time.
I resist you, pretender!
Even the captain's speeches now feel like they go on for longer. In the first game, they'd say something intimidating and then they'd just get on with it.
No more killing from the shadows for you. Not today.
Here though, these stupid assholes crap on for like 20 seconds, as if one of their attributes is that they're in love with the sound of their own voice.
I've been looking for you for a long time. My skin, it grows and contorts. It swells and twists. Nothing, it seems, can stop it. But you are the remedy for my ills.
In fact, I even found a guide on Steam to disable all of this dialogue. It's also often really goofy writing, feeling nothing like that gritty tone that the first game had, where they're often being this really out-of-place banter with some of the stuff they say.
Alright, first we kill the intruder, and then we silence that alarm! I'll get the headache!
Ratbag shows up again here too, which I do appreciate, and at least with that guy, like they'd established that he was a comic relief character, which worked in the first game considering he was really the only one trying to be funny. But when every second or third captain here makes some weird joke or remark, it just seems out of place.
This can only end one of 2 ways. You lying dead on the ground, or me lying dead on the ground. Really hope he's not that second one.
And I think that was genuinely the most jarring thing about all of this, especially coming into it after playing Shadow of Mordor.
If there's one thing you need to know about me, Talk, is that I am the greatest wit Mordor has ever seen.
Here though, they've all got these elaborate, overly designed outfits and personalities. And I mean, don't even get me started on what's going on with this singing one, for instance.
You may have heard of one like me. He prances, dances, and sings with glee.
Or how about this bloke who's dressed like a pirate?
Now that's a great-looking shirt.
Hey, Captain.
Then of course there's Bruce, the Uruk, who for some reason has an Australian accent. And again, look, like, I'm not an expert on the books, but I highly doubt an Aussie Uruk was the thing that Tolkien had in mind when he created these characters.
Bright Lord, Dark Lord. Same thing, really.
But my point still stands in that a lot of them just don't really feel like something out of Lord of the Rings. I mean, there's no grit. Where's the grit?
Go on, have a go.
That does, however, bring me on to the main feature of Shadow of War, though, with taking over all these forts, seeing as Bruise is the player's introduction to all of this. And also someone that's best not spoken about all that much, considering his ultimate fate is pretty damn nasty.
You're all gonna die horribly. Yeah, my kind of black.
Anyway, after about 10 or so hours into the story, once Talion gets his ring back from Shelob, it introduces this whole fort takeover mechanic, where you go from realm to realm and eventually kill the overlord of different forts, replacing it with one of your own. It's basically the same as the first game, where you got a bunch of captains and war chiefs and can either kill these guys or dominate them to work for you.
I am yours to command.
The only difference is that now above the war chiefs, there's an overlord. And again, like with the war chiefs, you can choose to take the underlings out beforehand to make that final push on the fort a lot easier. Even customizing your assault force with dominated Uruks, along with upgrading the siege itself, by adding in shock troops or other beasts to help you out. All culminating in a mode that feels like something out of a multiplayer game where you go around the fort taking over different capture points. And visually, it is a pretty cool spectacle, seeing quite literally dozens of Uruks running around the battlefield as your allies and fighting alongside you. Just a shame that the Overlord fights are usually pretty lame, always being in some bullshit arena where they spawn in constant ads. We usually spend more time avoiding those guys than actually fighting the Overlord directly. Plus, they're not even really like unique or interesting fights, they're just the same as the other captains and war chiefs you've fought dozens of times prior, only with way more health points and a bunch of attributes that make them even more challenging, pretty much almost always having a death-defying trait. Though you can at least again get your allies in there to help you out during the fight, which, yeah, does make it a bit easier. And overall, like, this does become a far more engaging mechanic than the actual story itself, where you're again essentially creating entire armies in all of these different regions. The Uruks again all have different levels, weaknesses, strengths and all that stuff, along with now classes, which affect things even more. And it's basically just like it was before, where when a captain's low on health you can either kill them or dominate them and make them part of your army.
I'll be your chosen!
Annoyingly though, you can't capture guys who are a higher level, and instead of being rewarded for taking on a more challenging opponent, you've instead got to shame them and drop their level down. All to just fight them again so you can actually dominate them. Which, yeah, is even more annoying when you do all of that stuff, only to find that that particular captain has an iron will and can't be dominated.
You cannot break my will! Oh, come on!
Now, apparently if you shame these guys, there's a chance it's gonna break them, but like trusting a fart, nothing is absolute. And most likely, it's all gonna turn to shit. So, I usually end up just killing them to save myself the time. But again, like, it is still a pretty fun component, going around essentially talent scouting for Uruk, and then putting them into all these different roles, like some incredibly brutal and high-stakes HR worker. Like in Shadow of Mordor, you can assign one as a bodyguard for a war chief, where they'll even literally backstab the war chief at the beginning of a fight, giving you a massive advantage.
For the Bright Lord!
And if you can't be bothered finding a new bodyguard for an existing war chief, then you can just dominate one that's already been assigned, saving yourself the work. You can even assign these guys as your own personal bodyguard, summoning them in at any time to help you out, which has genuinely saved my bacon more than a few times.
Man, I'm glad I called that guy.
And at one point I had a random Uruk pop up and save me from death.
Die on your own time, Ranger. You have work to do.
Even just sending these guys off to the fighting pits to take on random opponents and hopefully come out on top is a lot of fun. The issue I have with this though is that once you've done all of this once or twice, you know, taken over a couple of forts and all that, you've largely experienced all there is to see and do. And chances are, like the next 15 or 20 hours that follows are unlikely to change that. And that's really the thing overall here, is just how bloated and padded out it all feels. I mean, even after I'd cleared out the first couple of maps, which took me about 10 or so hours, the game then unlocked another 4 of them. Where it's really just doing the same shit all over again. Climbing watchtowers to get fast travel points and identify areas of interest, collecting intel about all the captains, before then going through all these basic story missions in autopilot mode. Story missions which are so easy that it almost becomes boring, and a lot of which just reuse the same concept over and over. Like how almost every single one of them for Idril or Baranor has you going around rescuing captured Gondorians. There's a whole series of these tracking down the different Nazgul who attacked you in the opening, and these all end in more or less the exact same fight, every time. I mean, they might have slightly different movesets, but it's ultimately the same fight, requiring you to just banish them when their health is low enough. And while I will admit, it is kind of cool seeing the backstories for all of these characters, that doesn't remove the repetition factor. The worst one by far though is the mission chain for that Swedish chef as you try to stop an Uruk named Zog from finding fresh victims for his ever-growing army of the undead. And for most of these, you're just going around different areas destroying corrupted totems, one by one, often 4 or 5 times per mission. In fact, even after you finally confront and kill Zog, he just gets revived in the very next mission, and you have to kill him all over again. But not before cleansing another 5 totems in the area, because yeah, we haven't done that enough already, have we? I don't know, am I kind of making a point here in just how repetitive this all is?
Thank you kindly, Ranger. I had given up.
It's not clever or fun, it's just 1 or 2 mechanics dragged out for like 10 missions. I mean, there is something to be said about how tight and focused that first game felt in comparison. Shadow of Mordor had those 2 main areas to explore. Shadow of War, though, has 5, including 1 extra they added as DLC. And whereas by the 25-hour mark with the first game, I'd finished the story and almost 100% of the entire thing, by that point in War, I still had multiple areas left to beat and missions left over. Which might sound good, but all of which would just require me to do the same thing I'd already been doing for the past 20 hours. I don't know, it's kind of like Shadow of Mordor felt like a game made by Lord of the Rings fans, whereas Shadow of War feels like a game made by a corporation. Where it's like I said before, the goal's more about retention than completion. It's like someone thought, how much stuff do they need to include to make the player invest as much time as possible in the product? And you can still see the remnants of that with the whole microtransaction elements around leveling up and improving your armies. I mean, while the option to buy these loot boxes doesn't exist anymore, the mechanics still very much do. And can be used to bypass leveling up or improving that army manually. Overall, I just feel like this game is a great example of how packing more of something into a game doesn't necessarily make it better. But in the game's defense, like, this really was the peak for the popularity of these kind of massive open world games. I mean, we had stuff like The Witcher 3, Breath of the Wild, and Red Dead Redemption 2 to name a few. And for a game that lifts so much from everything else around it, it's only logical that it'd do the same thing with the game world and cram in as much crap as possible to keep people invested. I guess my point though is that they never really needed to. It could have had 3 areas in total, been 10 hours shorter, and probably ended up being far more engaging to play.
There is truth in your vision.
Either way though, this was the last game that Monolith Productions ever made. And not only did the studio die with this series, but also that Nemesis System they created too. Which, I guess now is just lost in time, like tears in rain. Nothing else though, playing through both of these games gave me enough motivation to go back and watch that film trilogy yet again. And thankfully that is something that hasn't aged a day.
They cannot resist my ring.